I titled today's conversation Mind Map, Only Imagine Everything Already Being That. Only imagine everything already being that. That knowledge is bliss, or the perfection that you are seeking for. Exodus 3:14, I am that I am. I am that I am. And as you are already that perfection, if you imagine anything, imagine from the premise of being perfection. That makes perfect sense. You are that perfection that you were seeking for your whole life. That is the way that is being as is, or being that. And you are already that. That is the knowledge you were seeking for. So in other words, you could say you were just seeking to realize that. So you can call that knowledge bliss or happiness or fulfillment. So you are completely fulfilled. You exist prior to any thoughts, emotions, behaviors, this world, the appearances of this world, which thoughts, emotions, behaviors are appearances as well to you. You exist prior to all these things as perfection, as that, as complete fulfillment. Now, as an individual, you may desire to experience your fulfillment. Nothing wrong with that. You desire to experience your fulfillment in whatever shape or form. Relationships, business, life experiences. So Neville Goddard wrote a wonderful book called Prayer, the Art of Believing. Now in this book, chapter 2, titled Imagination and Faith, he said, prayers are not successfully made unless there is a rapport between the conscious and subconscious mind of the operator. This is done through imagination and faith. So again, a rapport between the conscious and subconscious mind of the operator. And I trust you see it here very clear in this quote. You are the operator prior to the subconscious mind. In other words, you can, via your conscious mind, imagine anything that you would like to imagine. You can imagine yourself doing whatever it is that you desire. So the question then is, why would an individual imagine themselves to be anything less than who they are prior to the conscious and subconscious mind, which is that perfection, that fulfillment? Well, for whatever reason maybe, one could say they do not know who they are. If they know who they are, they would not imagine anything less than what they desire, which is to experience that fulfillment in form, as all these things. So Mark 11:24, it states, therefore I say unto you, and this is the King James Bible translation, therefore I say unto you, what things soever ye desire, what things soever ye desire, when ye pray, believe that ye receive them, and ye shall have them. Now, if you look at the other translations that I've got on my screen here, we've got the New International Version, the New Living Translation, the English Standard Version, and the Berean Standard Bible Translation. You see that it uses, and this is just some of the translations that use the word received instead of receive, like the King James Bible. So King James Bible shows receive, and these ones show received. Now, interestingly, the Aramaic Bible translation says, "Therefore I say to you that everything you pray and ask, believe that you are receiving it, and you shall have it." So we see received, receive, and receiving. And now we can actually relate these together. Prior to you receiving it in form here, you are already that. That is why I titled the mind map, "Only imagine everything already being that." That knowledge is bliss or fulfillment or love or peace or happiness, which is whatsoever things you desire. And I'm speaking from personal experience. In 2004, I read a book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And he said something like that, which all these books are inspired by the same teachings from the various scriptures of the world. And he said the same thing, he just said it in his own way. He said that if you have a burning desire, that is your definite chief aim. That is what you will inevitably experience. So you just don't identify with any other kinds of beliefs that suggest otherwise, which are stored in the subconscious mind. And those beliefs are dissolved along the way. And not only do you physically experience that in form. For me at that point was to get out of $50,000 debt by imagining myself having in my possession $25,000. So not only did that happen, my relationship with money transformed. What I thought was before Think and Grow Rich, that money was a result of stress, force, frustration, working really hard. And then I realized that, and it makes perfect sense now, that those are conditions. How do I know? Because those conditions fell away and that money showed up in a more effortless way. Now I said to myself, how far does this go? I mean, how effortless and easeful can it be? So I applied the information to move up in my corporate career. I started an IT business in 2009, built that to success, transitioned from that in 2013, started this YouTube channel, consulting practice. And I can honestly say that over the years, these conditions, which we can refer to as inharmonious relationship with money, fell away. And they could appear, for example, when you're doing a presentation with a prospect, all of a sudden there may be a doubt appearing in mind that suggests that who are you to offer this other person that is more qualified, etc., should be the one offering. And we can see how illusory that doubt is, because we know that the prospect is there to buy the product or service from us. But meanwhile, the individual is thinking about this kind of thought that has nothing to do with what the prospect is looking for. You see that? So these kinds of doubts, or thoughts specifically of doubts, which spawn from beliefs in the subconscious mind, would appear in mine, and I would not identify with them, or as I say sometimes, they appear to disappear. And as I would no longer identify with them, the conditions would fall away and I would continue to receive. I was always receiving the fulfillment. It just did not appear that way through that conditioning. Yet when that conditioning or that programming in the mind began dissolving and continued to dissolve, I inevitably got to the point where, you may know that story. In 2017, I was in Playa del Carmen, Mexico. I was there for 2 weeks and I wasn't doing anything, yet money was flowing in. I had my consulting practice generating recurring revenue, etc., etc. Stuff that I talk about on my new YouTube channel, where I get into the nuances of entrepreneurship. If you're interested in that, I'll link in the description to it. And I asked myself the question while I was there. It just spontaneously appeared in mind, the question. I wasn't trying to ask the question. When was I the happiest, the most joyful, the most blissful, being as I am, you could say it that way. When was I being as I am? And the answer emerged as the word flow. It was while I was in flow where I was experiencing this Aramaic Bible translation version, receiving it. Like it was constantly happening. It was constantly happening and appearing as all these things. Business, relationship, etc., etc., etc. I also noticed there was conditioning in my mind that said, if this condition is there, then I can experience flow. If this other condition is there, then I cannot. Or I can experience flow in business in particular areas and not in relationships. And if this condition, that condition, again, it was so obvious to me that it was conditioning. And this conditioning I was identifying with. I would imagine these things which do not represent that which I am. I trust you see this very clearly now. Over the years, I've been calling them illusory thoughts, illusory imaginal activity that suggests that I am not that which I desire to be, which I already am, as I mentioned. You are that complete fulfillment, and you receive desire within to know that you are that and experience that in form as all these wonderful things. Now, having found the kingdom, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. Having found the kingdom, which is that, again, Exodus 3:14, I am that. Having found that, which is the kingdom, prior to all these things, I can see clearly then, you can see clearly, we're in the kingdom now, we can see clearly that any of these conditions that suggest not being that perfection, not being completely fulfilled, are illusory. So I want to go back to what he had said here. Prayers are not successfully made unless there is a rapport between the conscious and subconscious mind of the operator. Now here's the interesting thing. To suggest this versus that, like a conscious mind conflict with the subconscious mind, is an illusory thing to suggest when you know that you are that which is prior to these concepts of conscious and subconscious mind. So they can only be in conflict if we imagine them to be in conflict. That is generating resistance for the individual to consciously accept that which they imagine as the way it is. Now, the way to dissolve that conditioning is to know who you are. You are that still I am presence. Again, Exodus 3:14, I am that I am. That is the way it is. You are that which is. You know what is. Be as is. Be as is. So as you know you are that prior to these conditions, thoughts that suggest otherwise, you naturally, effortlessly imagine yourself being that which you desire to be. If you think, as I say sometimes, you really think for yourself. One other way of saying it is, imagine everything already being that, perfection, or don't imagine, because you're already that. Now, what I mean by that is, I don't know if you saw Thursday's video. If you haven't seen it, I'll link in the description to it. There's this wonderful book called Power of Kabbalah by Yuda Berg. And as you know, Neville Goddard had studied Kabbalah. His mentor Abdullah was also a Kabbalistic rabbi from Ethiopia. Now, what I had mentioned in Thursday's video was one of the big takeaways. One could even say the biggest takeaway from that book, The Power of Kabbalah by Yuda Berg, has a foreword written by Madonna in it, is do not react, to allow the light in. So the light is pure consciousness, that pure bliss. So I am that pure awareness. My real nature is bliss or fulfillment or perfection. So mind-blowing that is, that I don't even know the limits of that bliss or that fulfillment or that perfection, which is completely fine. I know that I am that, yet through desire, I have a desire to experience that fulfillment or that perfection or that bliss in form. So I can imagine what that looks like, or I may not imagine what that looks like. I may simply abide as that feeling of bliss, of fulfillment. And naturally, spontaneously, what happens is it appears in some shape or form. It appears in some shape or form. So the way they taught it in the book was to not react and allow the light in, which again, the light is pure consciousness. So Genesis 1:3, it says, "And God said, the light shall be, and the light was." So God, perfection, created perfection, and you are that perfection. Here, or you could say, you are that fulfillment here. You are that perfection. You are that fulfillment here to experience your perfection and your fulfillment. Now, a person may say, what about all these conditions? They fall away. You just don't identify with them. Do they really represent you? They do not represent you. And I can assure you, you and I know different. All I did is everything that I shared throughout the videos on this channel. And now we're talking about, lately we've been discussing, I do nothing. That is I do nothing. I do nothing means I do not react to allow the light in. So here's an example. I had a client and a friend who, when we would interact, there would be this tension, there would be this conflict, there would be argumentations. I would think us versus them, me versus them versus me. There's no such thing. I am that pure awareness, they are that pure awareness, and our real nature is bliss, fulfillment, perfection. So can I be honest with myself and say, am I being as I am in this situation? I imagine them to be in conflict with me. I imagine them to be in argumentation with me. We're going to argue the point to see who's right. Prior to that, all is right. All is right. That's a way of saying it. Or Ramana Maharshi had said this one time. He said, it will come all right in the end. So in the end, which is the beginning, as there's only now, again, Peshitta Aramaic Bible translation of Genesis 1:3, and God said, the light shall be, and the light was. The light of pure awareness, that pure consciousness is here now. Person may think, no, it's going to be next week or next year. That light of pure awareness, that pure consciousness is here now. That is what is meant by do not react. Let the light be as the light was, perfection. And so what happens then is it appears in form, in some shape or form. So with them, as I no longer identified with these conditions, what started to play out was harmonious conversation, harmonious relationship. There was no tension. The relationships grew, or you could say the relationships evolved, or the relationships became better, or they became more harmonious. Whatever way you want to describe that perfection, whatever way you want to describe that fulfillment, it appears. Now, one might say, how did you do it, Joseph? I told you, I did nothing. Silence is how you know who the doer of the works is. You know, at the end of Neville Goddard's lectures, he would say, those were his final words. Now let's go into the silence. Now let's go into the silence. Why? Because only God alone exists prior to concepts and figures, and the highest, purest teachings are delivered by God alone in the silence. Prove the point. If it's clarity you're looking for, if it's answers you're looking for, do you not get the answers in the silence? Absolutely. If it is peace you're looking for, happiness or fulfillment, which is why I always say you are love, happiness, peace, bliss, fulfillment. Where do you experience that unconditional love, happiness, peace, bliss, fulfillment? in the silence. The answers, the still small voice, intuition, arise naturally, effortlessly in the silence. So prior to this thought of conscious mind versus subconscious mind versus conscious mind, etc., you are already that. So in other words, prayer is acknowledgement of what you already have or what you already are. That's why I say desire points to fulfillment. Desire points to fulfillment because you are that already, which you desire to be. What else does it point to? If Mark 11:24 says, therefore I say unto you, whatsoever things ye desire when ye pray, believe that ye receive them. And again, the other translations, received, and then receiving. It means you're already that. You're already that. So if you're already that, what else is there to do other than experience that? You are that complete fulfillment, and you came here to experience that fulfillment. Now, a person may not know this because they're identified with conditioning. And this conditioning causes them to look outwardly for fulfillment, for love, for happiness, for peace, for bliss. Nothing wrong with them for desiring to experience the love, the happiness, the peace, the bliss, the fulfillment in form. Absolutely. Nothing wrong with them. What I mean by that is that's conditioning. They think that the love, the happiness, the peace, the bliss, the fulfillment can only be experienced if a particular outward condition is there. Yet meanwhile, they are the source of their love, happiness, peace, and bliss. They are the source of their fulfillment. How do they know? Because prior to the programming or the conditioning in the subconscious mind, they are already that. And they know that they are that through desire. A desire emerges within. And so what happens then is they imagine themselves already being that which they desire to be. That's the rapport between the conscious and subconscious mind, as he said, done through imagination and faith. Now, faith can sound like a force-based thing to do. Now it's time to be in faith. So as you know that you are that complete fulfillment, you exist as that perfection, you naturally live in faith. You don't look outwardly for fulfillment because you know that you are fulfilled. What happens then is those things manifest more easier, more effortlessly, more flow-based because there are no flow restrictors in the subconscious mind. Or if the individual is about to identify with a flow restrictor, which is a condition, they don't identify with it, as mentioned earlier, the thoughts of doubt, and then everything appears to be in harmony more so. So the person that looks outwardly, they think that the physical fact or the appearance determines their psychological state. He calls this the law of reversibility. And he said, if a physical fact can produce a psychological state can produce a physical fact. Now, prior to the psychological state, you are that fulfillment. You are that love, that perfection you were seeking for. You are already that, which changes your psychological state. You can say mind goes inward because it knows the source of fulfillment now that lumines the mind. You could say the mind gets all its fulfillment from the source of fulfillment. I am that pure awareness, completely fulfilled. So of course then it would appear as the psychological state of the individual has transformed. They have become more flow-based, more peaceful, more blissful, more joyful, because they know their real nature is that fulfillment. So then what happens? The conditions just fall away. They continue to fall away. And we can say they no longer believe that the physical appearance is required to be a particular way in order to experience fulfillment or happiness or peace or bliss. Now, Paradoxically, interestingly, all these things are added onto them. Their attention, so this is how we can describe it, their attention automatically goes or automatically appears to go, whatever way you want to say it, to reflect their fulfillment. So in other words, they see God everywhere. Blessed are the pure of heart, for they shall see God. So they see fulfillment here, peace here, bliss there, opportunity here. They're able to spot opportunities where people might not see opportunities. And this is enormously beneficial for the entrepreneur. This is enormously beneficial for life experiences, etc. Conversations with individuals who know who they are, know that they are that prior to all these things, completely fulfilled. Do not let a physical appearance, what he called physical fact, produce a psychological state. They know that the psychological state is determined from how they relate to the appearances, and they relate ideally from the premise of being fulfilled or perfection. And even if they do not know what that perfection looks like, that's okay. It's not like they have to try to force themselves to imagine. If they imagine, they naturally imagine it to be, and it appears that way. Now, if they don't imagine, then they do not react, and the light appears, and it appears as a wonderful experience. So it's not like with my friend or my client, I'm trying to imagine them to be this way and that way, and if they don't appear this way and that way, then I'm going to go back and force myself to imagine this and that. They are, prior to me imagining, they are prior to, we all are, prior to all these appearances, perfection, fulfillment. So I just abide as I am, completely fulfilled, feeling the peace. You know, as he says here, with the knowledge of law of reversibility, the disciplined individual transforms their world by imagining and feeling, or if the individual doesn't consciously imagine, feeling, just feeling. Only what is lovely and of good report. Why? Because love is who they are. Love is who I am. Fulfillment is who I am. Fulfillment is who they are. Perfection is who I am. Perfection is who they are prior to the conditions of what they need to look like, what I need to look like in order to be perfect. You see how illusory those conditions are. They just generate interference patterns or conflict or these illusions of lack. As he says here, the beautiful idea they awaken within themselves shall not fail to arouse its affinity in others. They are already that, I am already that. Everyone is just appearing to be more of that perfection or that fulfillment. So, from personal experience, what started to happen was when you connect with people, when you build relationships, more of that perfection emerges, more of that fulfillment emerges with each interaction, with each experience you have with them. So if you're a business consultant, for example, you'll notice that your clients are getting better, you can say it that way, or they're improving in their skills, or they're manifesting more success, or something like that. Your friendships get better and better. You have wonderful life experiences as you live this way, because you're just being who you are, really. And if you do imagine, you only imagine already being that. That's why I titled the mind map, only imagine everything already being that, or don't imagine. Just let it be as it was in the beginning now. Genesis 1:3. And God said, the light shall be, and the light was. So I trust you found this video to be helpful. Let's conclude this with an auto-suggestion to further encourage. You could say, I know that I am that. That knowledge is bliss. That knowledge is fulfillment. From the premise of being that perfection, that fulfillment, that bliss, everything and everyone appears to be more fulfilled, more of that perfection, blissfully and effortlessly in flow as I remain as I am, witnessing all these things which are symbols of that fulfillment, that peace, that bliss, that perfection added on to me by grace and grace alone. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk with you soon. Take care.